Okay, right. Yeah. Okay. Welcome everyone. I can do this without the microphone, I think. So, welcome everyone here and everyone who's joining our live stream. I'm not sure if there's many right now, but at least there's always a few people that watch it afterwards. So this is the fourth International ICT4D Symposium, and it's really international because we have an international guest who I will introduce shortly. Oh, could you turn the speakers on your laptop? So, as I said, this is the fourth symposium. We've had symposia in 2014, 2015, when Gayo was also with us last year, and this year is the fourth instantiation. This year we've downsized it a bit to a half day, but we're always very happy to sort of, in this case, end the course with a number of very nice talks, and also make it open to the broader public. So we have a few people who are not joining the course joining us here today. So we're very happy with that. Okay, this year's theme every year we have a theme is a very light theme, so we don't force this theme upon any of the speakers. But the theme we want to connect also to a day that's here tomorrow on sustainability. So we believe also that ICT for development has some relation to sustainability, to ICT for sustainability. So I think some of the talks will address that, and others will not. Go to the next slide. So for those of you who don't know me, I think everybody knows us by now, but we are hosting this year's symposium as well. I'm not going to introduce it because I'm really sure that everybody knows who we are. So, skip to the next one. If there's suddenly a guest from outside coming in, then I will introduce myself. Okay, so this is the program. So first of all, we have a keynote of Gayo Diallo, who will introduce after this. Then I hope Christian Aart will show up in time. He usually does, so we're not too worried about that. He will give us insight on the business perspective of things. We've been working with him a lot, also in some of the projects that you have encountered. We have a short coffee break, so there will be new coffee. Then Francis will talk a bit about his work in Ghana. It's a different talk than he gave during the class, so excited about that. Wendelien gives us a bit, who's also still not here, but will also show up. Will give us a bit of an outsider perspective on regreening and sustainable businesses in that domain. And then finally, there's a video presentation from Aska, who unfortunately couldn't be here, but he is working on this on the Nepal project that I showed earlier, and he will be here virtually as well. So we'll wrap up by that. Welcome. Okay, so we start with, first of all, sorry, I need to thank the sponsors, of course, because that's one of the reasons why we could actually invite Gayo Diallo here. So we're very happy. So it's sponsored by three groups from the VU Institute for Computer Science and the International Office, and the Netherlands Research School for Information and Knowledge Systems 6. We might encounter as well. There's two of our Team 6 members. Welcome. So very grateful also for their support, continued support for our symposium series. Okay, so the first speaker is Gayo Diallo. He's an associate professor at Université de Bordeaux. And we've been working with him since I think 2 years. We were trying to establish a research project around ICT for African traditional medicine. So Gayo's expertise is in semantic web research for the medical domain. It's actually where some of our colleagues also are interested in. So this is a very close match to the things that we're interested in, and we're trying to set up a research collaboration. And in that context, we're very happy to hear Gayo talk about his research. This one? Yeah, sure. Oh, this might have been crashing very hard. No, so it'll start up. That's
don't know why somebody decided to do a complete meltdown.
Nice.
Surprised to think.
Yeah. Ja, ik heb hem ontmoet, ja. Voor die andere Wijnand?
Ja, die heb ik niet gesproken.
Nee, ik ook niet. Oké, ja?
Nou ja, maar ik ben zelf bij je van. Ik ben gewoon zo dit, ik kan het zo nog eens
Ja.
Thanks. So, first of all, thank you guys for inviting me to present actually let's say a joint proposal. So you know more about what I'm going to talk about here today. And I'm very happy to be here, like, in 2015. I tried to make it live because we actually just submitted the proposal around what I'm going to talk about. So I won't go into detail, I'm gonna, keep in a high level and present the African traditional medicine issues and then the solution that we would like to propose to come up with the issues on that. Before to go to the presentation, let me just very quickly introduce University of Bordeaux, where I come from, and what we do there. And I warmly invite you to come to see us. It's a very nice city, and as you can see, it was the best European city in 2015, and Lonely Planet also. Oh, it's not 2006, actually 2016. So please come to visit us. We have a very good weather, but cloudy. Yeah, it's in the southwest, of France. So we have the Bassin d'Arcachon. If you know, it's not far from there. Yeah. So it's from 2014. 3 of the 4 universities of Bordeaux joined together to form the new University of Bordeaux. Actually, the actual name is the New University of Bordeaux, which is around 50,000 students and 6,000 staff members. And we have, it's a very general, let's say, university, because the topics rank from humanities, social science, and medicine. Okay. We have around 2,000 PhD students, so there are very various doctoral study there, and which include, of course, ICT and ICT in healthcare in particular. And we do have, in France, I don't know how it works here, but the government is pushing to merge the university, and we won an award, and we have, let's say, plenty of money to do stuff, to refresh buildings and stuff, new research and collaboration.
And actually, this is I get some funding from there in order to prepare the proposal that I'm gonna now present and gonna share with you. So from a research point of view, actually, I belong to two research teams. One is really very healthcare related teams, because we belong to what we call the INSERM, which is the National Research Council in Medicine, which is the second biggest research council apart from CNRS, which is the National Research Center in France, which is more IT related. And I belong to a very small team actually, which is a research group which work on IT applied to healthcare. So that's mean we work closely with the Bordeaux hospital and use data from there. And in the meantime, I also belong to the library. Library is the main laboratory in computer science in Bordeaux, and in the team which is specialized in bioinformatics and data visualization. They have a tool which is quite known. It's the Tuyp platform that is used in many projects. So, in terms of research, we do knowledge and data integration in healthcare, and in particular, the aim is to prepare data for those who want to do epidemiology, clinical research, or public health in general, because my teaching activity actually belongs to the Bordeaux School of Public Health. So what we do is at the population level, not at the individual level. And of course, healthcare-related knowledge modeling, semantic information retrieval, and ICT4D, because we work with Africa in particular, and related to projects with healthcare, like the one I'm gonna present now. Well, the main application domain of what I'm gonna introduce now is the African traditional medicine. So when we talk about African traditional medicine, which is quite very wide, because it includes both spiritual, so non-formal things, and plant-based or natural product-based medication. What I'm going to talk about is more, the plant-based medication, not the spiritual thing, because actually it is very hard to handle. It's not really very scientific, let's say. So our traditional medicine is the oldest form of healthcare delivery, and not actually only in Africa, but also, even in the high-income countries like the Netherlands, even if it's not referred as traditional medicine, but as complementary or alternative medicine. So all these medicine that use plant, herbs, and natural products. Okay. And the World Health Organization estimates that about 80% of people in Africa use it, and it is used mainly as a first-line treatment because it's quite affordable compared to the conventional medicine. I'm gonna show something about that. And how it is defined. So TME is the total sum of knowledge, skill, and practices based on theories, belief. This is in terms of spiritual things that we are not addressing here, experiences indigenous to different cultures, whether explicable or not, using the maintenance of the health system, the prevention, diagnosis, improvement, treatment, physical and mental illness. So this is the overall definition of the World Health Organization. And from African traditional medicine point of view, there are a lot of spirituality that are used, because sometimes, for instance, they think that taking a medication, you have to have some specific position, you have to put it in a specific, box, or in order to be efficient, even if it's not really scientifically proven. And this activity is mainly done by traditional healers or traditional practitioners who are trained in an informal way. So so far they do not attend school like medical doctors. Even if now most of the countries are trying to introduce some curriculum around this topic. And as I said, ATM is the first line of treatment for various pathologies. For instance, if we take the malaria in Mali, 60% of children are firstly treated by African traditional medicine, by plants, before to go to the GP, because it's affordable, it's easy to find out, etc. And another reason is the fact that conventional drugs are really quite expensive regarding the income average of low-income countries, like countries in Africa. And this is something which is really a barrier to access to treatment, to access to healthcare. And one other main issue is the fact that knowledge is mostly tacit and are transmitted orally from father to son, some grandfather to son, or some mutual relatives. So it is not formally transmitted. And I said, people do not attend school for that, even if it's kind of, well, it's school, but in an informal way. And another very important issue is about the adverse drug reaction. Because African traditional medicine use mainly natural products, people think that it is safe because they are using plants. But actually we have the same issue that we can have in the conventional drugs, because you have some compounds, molecules that could interact in bad ways and could lead to some side effects. And this is really a main issue, and this is not taken into account in the ATM domain. And so you have plenty of death because of that. Another issue is the fact that the two systems coexist without really interacting, so the conventional and the traditional medicine one, even if they can benefit from each other. And it's also figures say that 25% of modern medicine are made from plant, actually. And so they have some common molecules that could actually be seen. And I think ATM could benefit from the advances in terms of, for instance, pharmacovigilance, so in terms of tracking, monitoring adverse drug reaction. But in the same time, conventional medicine could also benefit from all these findings from plant-based medication. So there is a very important issue in trying to get them work together. And there is another barrier, which is the fact that ATM users are underserved people. So most of countries in Africa, the majority of people live in rural area. That means they have low education, mostly, so which lead to lack of literacy, and low infrastructure, technological, telecom infrastructure, transportation. So they spend a lot of time, to reach the first healthcare center, which is really not good for accessing, in a very efficient manner, the healthcare system. In the meantime, there are some opportunities that could leverage the usage of ATM, in particular in the context of ICT. One thing is the fact that there is a strategic plan of the World Health Organization which push, towards having, emphasizing the use of ATM and the importance in the healthcare system. This is one thing. And the second thing is that 36 out of 46 countries in Africa approved a regional strategy, pushed by the World Health Organization, and ATM is identified as a research priority. So, yeah, identified as a research priority, but also pushed in order to really be involved in the whole. There is another important opportunity, which is the high rate, the high penetration rate of mobile in Africa, in particular West Africa. The International Telecommunication Union said that Africa is the first continent to have more mobile phone than landline. So this is quite an opportunity that could be used, of course, to reach people that traditionally you can't actually reach. So knowing that, we tried to imagine and some solution in order to answer the previous issues that I was raising. So let's quickly just show you how people used to work, how ATM expert, like ethnobotanical expert or pharmacologist expert, pharmacologist also the people who study plants and plants molecule, etc. So in order to assess and evaluate plant-based medication, what they do first is to do ethnobotanical investigation. So they try to contact traditional healers, mainly based on reputation. They gather them and try to do inventory of the plant that they use in order to treat some disease or identify disease. Then there are two processes that are followed. First is botanical identification, which means they try to identify all these vernacular names and synonyms that are used to refer to a particular plant. But if you are in the same country, according to the region, to the context, to the ethnic group, so the naming are not the same. And of course, this is very important to identify in order to build up some national pharmacopoeia. Okay. And another thing is to identify the usage of plants. So what the plants are for, where they are efficient, how are the dosage, knowing that dosage is not really like what we have in the conventional medicine, but usually, traditional healers use, the hand in order to dose the products. So if you have, let's say, big hand, it's not the same if you have a small one. So this is also an important issue. And of course, because they are scientific, so they do literature survey to see if there are already known side effects or pharmacovigilance effects of the plant that they have identified. And they, following this process, sometimes they come up with some very important products, and some of them went to market. For instance, for hypertension, there are some, which come from the traditional medicine. So let me just give you here an example taken from the Guinea context. So the first column here is actually the name of some plants in Fulani, which is a local language in Guinea, but also in Mali and Burkina Faso. And you have the prescription associated to the plant for treating the malaria. As you can see here, well, you have a set of plants here, Ngala, Boile, Cassia, and the corresponding, scientific name that is identified by the ATM expert, which is really very difficult to identify. And then you have the prescription. As you can see, the prescription is quite very light. So you have to boil, drink, and wash yourself. This without dosage, in the composition of the prescription. So this, these are facts, these are data that actually we can have access to. So one of the things is how we can reuse those kind of things in order, of course, to help, bringing ICT within the ATM domain. Because as I said, ATM-related knowledge is tacit and transmitted orally. So one main issue is how we can keep this knowledge for not to be lost. So this is one main issue. So we have to try to, to keep log of this kind of information. I also have another slide here which show the plants and all the synonyms regarding one country and the naming of these plants in the different languages within the country. Of course, I have here 2 languages, but we can have more, on that. And my message here is to say, we have, and you are guys who are doing also knowledge representation, so that means the concept that you are referring to has some synonyms in different languages that we have to keep, in order to cover briefly what is done. And sometimes also we have pictures of the plant, to avoid mistakes. And this is also important, and to keep log of it within, for instance, an ontology or a kind of vocabulary, in order to not, to do some, let's say, intelligent prescription. So plant evaluation. So they used to do. They used to monitor a group of people because, of course, there is no clinical research on ATM. No, at least not yet. So this is why sometimes some countries so far are not willing to introduce it officially within the healthcare system, because they said plants are not evaluated in a scientific way. But they do toxicity evaluation, so by doing some laboratory tests in order to know what are the toxicity of the plants and possibly which can lead to side effects, and of course the pharmacovigilance effect of the plants. So knowing these preliminaries, let's now very quickly present what we are trying to do and what we propose as a solution for ATM, taking benefit from semantic technologies, mobile technologies, etc. So the main question is, how can we introduce ICT to the ATM domain in order to help the above mentioned issue? We set up a multidisciplinary project which bring various competencies, various skills in order to propose a solution for that. I'm going to go now very quickly in some component of that. So the main objective is to develop a cohesive and integrated ICT approach which would allow patients, study practitioners, healthcare practitioners, public bodies who do regulation in order to access and use ATM in a safe and effective manner. This is the main objective. And we have 4 specific objectives. One is, as I said, it is a very important issue to digitalize and keep knowledge about ATM. So it's to collect, formalize, and digitalize ATM knowledge and practices for a set of target disease. Of course, it is not, let's say, it's not easy to say, well, we're going to address all existing disease. However, we can focus on a subset of them, and in our proposal, we focused on 6 diseases commonly encountered in West Africa, and that have been identified by the West African Health Organization, including malaria, tuberculosis, HIV, etc. And another specific objective is to deliver end-user services that could be used and that could ease, facilitate the inclusion of excluded people in particular within the healthcare system through the ATM. We're going to go into short detail on that. And of course, one, as I said, the pharmacovigilance issue that we name here phytovigilance because we are talking about plant is one of the main issues. And the idea is to help monitoring post-treatment in order to identify possible side effects of plant. And of course, to contribute the integration of the ATM in the national health system, through, for instance, training program, etc. So we do have 13 partners for doing this and filling this objective, including, of course, Bright University. We have 4 countries in Europe, which include 2 SME companies, including, of course, 2 cool monkeys with Chris, who is here, and 5 West African countries. We really focus on West Africa because even if, well, they are different countries, but they belong to the same regional organization, which is the ECOWAS. So they are under some same rules, let's say. And also we have the West African Health Organization in West Africa, which is a supranational organization, like, let's say, the World Health Organization here in the regional level, that is pushing towards including ATM in the healthcare system. Actually, they are a partner of the project, and we have 3 partners that used to work with traditional healers. We have 1 partner in Guinea, which is a national center for plant study, let's say, and they do have 2 products in the market, which came from traditional medicines, and they used to work with traditional healers, do ethnobotanic study, etc. And there is a hospital in Senegal, the Hospital Kermassa, which is mainly specialized. They only do ATM, so they have resident traditional healers, and the patients are treated only by plant and natural products. And over the years, they have now a set of recipes that came from the experience and the usage of plants, and that are administered to the patients. And there is also the University of Bamako with the traditional medicine department, who, of course, used to work with traditional healers. And one important thing is also to have 2 public bodies apart from WAHU, because one thing that we keep in mind is to know how we can sustain what we're gonna do, and so what will be the business model in order, as you have seen, traditional medicine in particular, we are addressing rural people, so it is not easy to say, well, you have to pay for a service if you have no even money for it. So you have to think about a way to facilitate, you know, the use of the service. And of course, in Europe, I have mentioned the VU, but there is another company based on Toulouse, used to work with actually VU and Tukul monkeys. And we have University of Oslo, which is specialized in doing plant assessment, plant evaluation, toxicity, etc. And they have a database of already studied plants in Mali. And there is the Medical University of Grasse, who do knowledge representation, medical knowledge representation. Yes. So, and what we said regarding the issues and the objective that I mentioned, we have 2 e-health services and 1, you know, let's say general service that will be provided to end users. So the e-health services are an e-prescription service and a phytovigilance service. The e-prescription service is actually a service that help the traditional healers to perform electronic prescription for patients that he already know, not all patients, but all patients that already know, which avoid sometimes commuting for several hours to come to see the traditional healers. And this also allows us to do phytovigilance service because it is electronic prescription. So that means we keep track of the treatment and we can then ask to the patient what kind of side effects he or she got after the treatment. And there is another service which is a service that will run on top of the data knowledge that will be gathered in order to do in particular data analytics and to understand really the actual usage in ATM according to different contexts in the countries that are used. Yes. So let's go through the workflow very quickly. So one thing is patient come for a consultation to the traditional practitioners who, of course, can do e-prescription with voice instruction, voice instruction. This is something I haven't emphasized here, but in order to overcome the lack of literacy, one thing that we rely on is voice technology. So to actually in the local languages, so to let people speak in their mother tongue in order not to feel excluded in the system, so they can interact with traditional healer in their mother tongue, and using, of course, mobile technologies. Depending on what kind of mobile they have, either database, data, smartphone, let's say, or very low 2G, for instance. So it could be SMS-based or data-based exchange between them. And there is some, as I said, this ATM knowledge gathering and exploration, which will help in particular pharmaco experts, because we are not going to do pharmacovigilance. They are already in the different countries pharmacovigilance systems that are running. However, as I said, they didn't address so far the phytovigilance part. So we will provide, hopefully, the necessary data that could help them to analyze, of course, the data in order to identify potential signals, so events between plants and side effects. And all these run on top a core component, which is the knowledge graph, ATM knowledge graph, which is actually the formal representation of the domain that is performed. Representation, actually, we go through some resources that are already available, which is available that we can have within the project, which are study practitioners' narration, that some interviews that you're gonna do in order to get their experience, in treating the 6 diseases that we said, plant and recipe data that are already available, from the partners. And there is a pharmacopoeia in West Africa, which is published by the West African Health Organization, with input from the partners that are included in the project that will be used, of course, in order to process them and identify something. And of course, doing scientific literature mining in order to identify possible findings, event, etc. And one important thing is to reuse what is already available within the linked data, global linked data platform. For instance, information regarding molecules and or drugs, and the components of drugs, because this could help, of course, doing the link between plant components, so plant molecules, and what we have in the conventional medicine. And as so far there are some advances in terms of pharmacovigilance that could be reused actually for the ATM domain. So of course you have the e-prescription. And one thing, and in the phytovigilance, and one thing also important is, as you kind of collect a lot of data, is to do 2 hackathons in West Africa, one in Guinea with the public body in Guinea and one in Burkina Faso, in order to let local ICT developers to reuse this data in order to to imagine new kind of application like serious game that could be used in order to train people around ATM. So here you have the ATM knowledge graph constituted by both the data that are collected and the structure. Well, in terms of technological standards that will be used, there is for handling the multilingual issue, the terminological multilingual issue, it is the simple knowledge organization system that will be used for having these synonyms properly handled. And of course, all will be used for the core structure of the ontology domain and mapped to the vocabulary that will be had. And one thing, in order to facilitate access to the information around ATM, is iconic language, in particular to partly overcome this lack of literacy. Okay, because people are usual, visual, let's say, and I'm going to show you an example about that. Of course, this is answered in a table store and delivered as a link with data. These are some examples of visual iconic language. It is actually a previous project run in Paris. As you can see here, this is a representation of cardiac disease. This is a drug for cardiac disease. Okay, surgery, cardiac disease, cardiologist, cardiosurgeon. So these are actually annotation or kind of component, additional component that you can link to the entities that you got in an ontology and can come up, when you are retrieving knowledge. And this is one kind of things that will be reused in the project. Of course, there are some issues, in particular regarding the ethics and the inclusion of patients in the study. So one thing is to have only patients who sign a consent form. We will not record identified personal data, but because we are doing pharmacovigilance, we're gonna retrieve data from patients, so we need to have the consent about that. And there is another very important issue, the intellectual property. So we had some strong discussion within the group in order to know what will be, the business model regarding that. Well, we come up with the solution to include only traditional healers who accept to share their experience. For instance, Hospital Kermassa is willing to do that. They are really, let's say, kind of open source like guys, and this is something that is really important. Also, we have also a consent form for them, because one thing was to say, well, how we can retrieve if, let's say, one day maybe a pharma company found the solution very interesting and we use what we have there, how we can find the original traditional healers who are come up with the knowledge we have there. And of course, there is a sustainability issue. As I said, this is not really a very business-oriented project. It's a social-oriented project. So you can sell it to the final end user. However, you can have to deal with public bodies like government in order to introduce it in the solution. So that's it. And the main idea, as I said, is to say, well, we can reuse semantic web technologies in order to address the issues of ATM. And one way, of course, to do that is to use these iconic languages or voice technologies in order to have them. And of course, there is one important issue, is the multicultural aspect. Even in the group, we are really very different. We have some African partners with different backgrounds. Maybe sometimes they are not used to participate in such a wide project. So this is important, even in the step of preparing a proposal for that. And of course, having relevant business model for ensuring sustainability of the project. So as I said, it was quite light, but I hope you have a general overview of the domain and what we are doing. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Gayo. It was a great talk, very informative for us. And I would like to ask the audience if there are any questions to Gayo. Sorry?
Yeah. You talk about ethics and intellectual property, right? Is there resistance from this traditional practitioner to share their, how is the acceptance of this at the end?
Well, one thing is, this is why I mentioned, for instance, the Hôpital Kermassar. They are willing, with their traditional leader, to share the experience they got. This is not an issue. Of course, however, you can encounter other traditional leaders who would not want to participate in the study. And in this case, of course, they won't participate because we would like to have the agreement first before to be included in the project. And your question actually brought me another one, is about the acceptance of the solution. I haven't mentioned that because this is also a very important issue. And I haven't said that here, but actually we imagined in the project to involve end user very early in the design of the solution through light lab, living lab, yes, in order to include them very early in the project, in the design of the project, etc.
Okay, more questions? Hank.
Yeah, thank you for your very interesting presentation. Is the kind of research that you're talking about, is it unique to Africa, or have there been similar projects in other regions in Africa to document traditional medicine?
Well, there is, there have been a previous project in China. There is a project to digitalize Chinese traditional medicine, which actually succeed because they have now introduced the outcome, the result of the project within the coming ICD, International Classification of Disease of the World Health Organization. So there is an initiative in China actually, very close.
In the African context, this is really unique.
Yeah, it's really the first time we're gonna apply this sort of kind of technology in the ATM.
And also all the components that you are talking about, the literacy,
yes,
delivery of services. So the whole package is very unique.
Yeah, it's really very unique. Yes.
Okay, more questions, please. No questions?
I was interested. So if we have represented the plants information in RDF or Semantic Web, you can link it to existing knowledge about plants, but also about medical databases. So what kind of added benefits will that link give to the end services?
Yeah, I think it will actually help for prescribing. Because we know now that a particular drugs lead to side effects, for instance, or if they are combined, so we can infer that the plant that have the same molecule will lead to the same effect. So we can avoid, co-prescribing by showing, to the traditional healers, oh, well, this can lead to, so this is a way to reuse.
The iconic language that you spoke about, did it already exist, or is it something that you are training people to understand, like this particular figure stands for the cardiac surgery?
Yeah. Well, as I say, there is already there is a previous project where they have used this. They have actually designed this iconic and used it in a project. But of course, we have, if we would like to use it in the context of ATM, we have to imagine new one because ATM is very particular. But sometimes reuse some of them. The disease is the same, you know, cardiac disease is a cardiac disease. And of course, this is why it is important to involve people within the living lab in order also to do training activities, you know. And this is part also of the acceptance of the solution actually that will be provided. Yeah.
So will you be mainly focusing on helping existing traditional practitioners with their activities, or will you also be addressing the patients themselves? And if you do, how do you overcome a possible issue of trust of a person with his own health to this system?
Well, one thing was about the automedication, we said, but we left because the advice of our African partners, which is really quite tricky. But yes, some things, you know, normal patient can reuse actually you can have a service that can tell, okay, I am having a cough is not really, you can have self-treatment for cough. So you can go and see the plant that you could be used for that. But there is no use case addressed to these specific things actually. Yeah. But maybe, you know, through the hackathon, they can imagine those kind of things.
Yes, you mentioned at the beginning about the spiritual connotations to some of these things. And how would you deal with that? Because there are some of these, a lot of the African traditional medicine practitioners who believe that the things they do are linked to something spiritual.
Yeah.
So how do you handle that?
So we made the choice not to handle it, actually, to leave it aside. And I know, for instance, in Hospital Kermassar, they are not absolutely blamed. The fate is not really scientific, you know. So far we are not dealing with it. But I have students who are working on this kind of things, you know, to see how you can represent. But you know, I think it could be very difficult, very hard. Hey, it's a guy who jumped to some new, you know,
I asked a question.
Yeah.
Gayo, when I talked to one of the partners from Mali, Adja, and she's from the health service in Mali, and she told me a story that once, let's say, an American pharmacological company saw a kind of plant, found a plant in Africa, which was very interesting, used by the community, and it was used to, let's say, to reduce weight. And then they thought, oh, that's very good for these people in the US, and they made an enormous business out of it. It was really a million business, and they didn't want to pay, let's say, or to attribute the, let's say, the findings to the community, but that was actually the owner of that knowledge. How do you cope with this in the project?
Actually, it is really very my personal feeling and personal something is to say, well, anyway, if we make things public, that means we can't avoid people to reuse what we're gonna have. However, what we're gonna leave public is anyway what the guys already will anyway let public, like Hospital Kermassar, the things, you know, public. But you know, to be honest, so far I haven't any finer way to deal with it. It's really very tricky, and we have to discuss more and see how we can retrieve the, you know, the original. And even, you know, sometimes we don't know who, because we are not using knowledge from or experience. I say actually experience, not knowledge. You know, we are not retrieving experience from one, but for set of them. So yeah, I think that's a very specific, you know, business model that it's not very hard to it's not very easy, I think.
Yeah.
You have to think.
very much. Okay, well, thank you very much again. It was a great talk, and I think you really show how interdisciplinary research works. And so you have medicine, you have traditional medicine, you have conventional medicine, you have semantic web, and you have web science, and everything together, ICT4D. And this is really how it should work to solve important problems, really global problems in health. So I think it was really great also for the students of ICT4D course to hear your story. It was for us great to hear your whole, let's say, conceptualization of the proposal that you made, and we were very happy to be part of that. And we hope that we will win, so that we continue.
So let's together do the finger crossed. So increase
crossed.
the,
Yeah, hope for the best. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
We don't give wine to someone from Bordeaux, so we can, but we give you a Dutch
excellent.
treats and some books on how to eat them.
Oh, okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
So the next speaker is Chris from Aart. Chris is one of the business partners we have. Chris is the director of Monkeys, SME. And we work with Chris already for many years in African projects, ICT4D projects. And actually he is the specialist in how to build these things, how to make the prototypes, how to show them to the users, and how to do that in a workshop, show the users and immediately get the feedback and improve the system. So he's incredibly fast in developing systems. Really, while we are talking, he's developing a new app. And he will tell us more. Chris is also part of the proposal that Gayo described to us. So it's very nice that it's all very close to our hearts what we're doing. So Chris, I will give you the floor now.
Thank you, Anna, for all these compliments. I can now tell my wife that I went to university. I would like to start with this screenshot. Any ideas? What is this?
Counting.
Sorry?
Counting.
Counting. You're all into ICT, right? Okay, I will give you what it is. This is a spreadsheet, one of the first ones. And the idea was that really long time ago, somebody invented the spreadsheet. And the idea was the spreadsheet was really good because it could calculate, it could add figures, would never make mistakes. And actually, people went buying systems. So this is the first iPad. And going to buy computers because of a really cool application. Let's call it a killer application. You buy hardware because the software is really good. And so I'm an app builder, and everybody asks me to build a killer application, or what do you think a killer application is? And actually, the killer application is something that makes people happy or improves their lives. So one of the ideas of the guy who actually invented the smartphone, this is Mr. Martin Cooper, and he invented the smartphone because he watched Star Trek, the old ones, and he saw they have this communicator, and he thought, well, why don't we have this? So he invented the smartphone, which is he invented the phone, let's say the phone. So you can communicate from distance without any wires to it. This guy thinks it's really, really stupid that we don't use a smartphone for phoning, but for everything else, like organizing our lives, making pictures and stuff like that. So, so actually, the guy who invented the phone doesn't understand what we can do now with it. And one of the things one of the lessons I have you guys to teach you is that sometimes you have to look differently at existing issues or problems. So, so my company is called Monkeys, and when I was really young, I wanted to join the fire department. And actually now I'm working for the fire department, the Amsterdam Fire Department. So one of the problems they have, if there's a fire, they come in and the first thing they do is smash a lot of water on it. And then the fire is gone. But then there is an additional problem that there is a lot of water in the city. And the question is, where does all this water go? And so that's one of the applications I'm building. The other one, perhaps you know, is from Marktplaats or eBay. The other one is it's called GID nice mee. It's the Dutch health department that tells you if you travel abroad, you have to be careful to take vaccines and medicines. And the last application we're building, so the Dutch have one official subculture in the Netherlands. It's called the house culture. And this is what you think it is. It's actually a step counter or a pedometer for people who make this funny dance. And then they call it hakken, so the Dutch people will understand what it is. And the question was, can you make an application that counts how many people make all these funny movements, and can you make a kind of gaming to see what's going on? So this is one of the cool applications we're doing now, and it will be released at DEF CON 1 in June. That's still the name of it. Okay, so let's talk about developing apps in and for Africa. So the name of the title is Mr. Jiri and Mr. Sanji. I will later on explain what it is. And the idea is, so what part of Africa have I been visiting and looking at? And it's called the Sahel, and Wendelien will explain something about sustainable land management. And the idea is, so probably something to do with hunger or stopping hunger. So the question is, so why do they need? Why should you build applications there? So first, when you do something like probably to do with improving life or work, and for whom are we doing this? Farmers or NGOs? What do we do? So what do I do? The only thing I can do is building applications or mobile applications. The question is, so how do you? So first you have to understand what's going on there. And then you build something, you deploy it, and you try to enhance it. And before you all can go to sleep, I will start with the conclusions of my talk. The first thing is always, so yeah, the culture is different. So if you go there, they are different than I am. And later on, I understand that I am different than all of them. So that's really to do with the way I think or I perceive the way they work. So if I'm at a university, people say, there's a guy from the business. Yeah, indeed, I work at the business. But also there is a cultural clash or difference. And the nice thing is to embrace that. So the second thing is that we'll tend to look at the technological part. So where is the semantic web? Where is all the data stuff? And it's always there. But first you have to understand who has this knowledge or this problem. So it's always to do with, first of all, the organization. Who is involved with that? And there's always somebody who has money, a budget owner. And of course, there are also users or end users who are going to do something with it. The third one is, if you go somewhere where they don't have too much technology and you want to introduce technology, you have to do a technology push. You just say, look, use this. This is going to improve your life or your work. And the other thing is that it has to be identifiable. So what we did in the project is that we give everything a name, like Mr. Rain or Mr. Nice Price. And the nice of this anthropomorphization is that people understand that it is something you can point to, and that it talks and it lives and it works, and you give them a way to talk about a software project in the name of a person. The other one is the rural conditions, and one of the examples is this one. So the Go Phone S5 is a Samsung clone, and a lot of devices in Africa, they say it is a Samsung, but it isn't. It's actually a clone. So one of the mistakes I made was trying to introduce virtual reality to the project. So the idea is you have this Google Cardboard, and you can look around, and it has need of a gyroscope. And every smartphone has a gyroscope, except these phones. So it doesn't work. And the last thing is about infrastructure. We talk about web, semantic web. If you go to Mali, there aren't any good servers. So if you want to host something, you have to do it outside Africa. So this is the conclusion. So now you can go on with whatever you do. Okay, so first of all, this is an example of an African computer. And if you look closely, there's a cat here. So we visited a lab, and what they did is constructing second-hand computers. So the idea is there are already a lot of computers there, and their business model was to take old computers, fix them a little bit, and put them together. This is an example of an African engineer. It's what he's doing. This is an example of an African database. So this is actually an archive. And the point is that, so if you want to host a database in Mali, you cannot do it in a computer because they're not really good hosting there. This is an example of an end user in his office. And this is an example of mobile users in their natural environment. And the idea is what we have done there is called ateliers, just workshops. And we're going to sit with these people and we're going to talk with them. And the strategy we use is to say to them, look, we don't know what you guys are doing. From my point of view, I have absolutely no idea how they work, know what they're doing. The only thing you can say, look, I can do something smart with mobile technology. I can build apps, I can listen to a database or whatever. And we'll let them figure that out, which we're doing. And so we also let them think about how to structure that a little bit. So the first question was, okay, if you foresee some kind of problem, who is involved with that? What's the organization? Who are the actors playing around? Next is, what's actually a problem? And most of the problems are we lack information, or the information is not fast enough there, or we would like to know something somebody else knows. Then the question is, what do you think would be a nice solution? Build an app for it, or do something with Fort? And the fourth one, if you would do it, what would be the advantage of doing that? And actually, we trained them to fill this in, and they started to work, and they came up with a couple of issues. So let's see. One of them here is in English to say, well, if you talk about land management or farming, trees are really important. We will hear today more about trees. And actually, the first thing they want to know is that they want to identify trees. Where are our trees, and what kind of trees are there? So the question was, can you develop an application that identifies trees and also put them on a map? Which actually is not really hard to do, because you have a device, a GPS, you walk around and you mark it. So this is how the Dutch would do it. Any idea what this is? Just the fruit. Excellent. Yeah. So if you look closely, so this gives the postal code of here. And this is it's called Boomregister, a tree register, so it's a Dutch initiative. Next day, what they have done, they took satellite images, and they said, well, we can see everything that's higher than something like 5 or 10 meters, and you distract everything that's building, so the rest of it should be trees. That's a little bit the idea. And the coloring, there's something about the height, and the idea is that you now would be able to identify it. Just to be clear, with only satellite images, you could identify what possibly would be trees, but not the kind of them, because the resolution of the satellites is not clear enough. But anyway, the idea was, well, could you do something like that, like this? So what we did is to talk about them. Okay, so you would like to have some kind of application where you can walk around and identify trees. So yeah, that's what we want. Okay. So we come up with Mr. Giri. Mr. Giri is Mr. Tree. Mr. Tree. And the nice thing, only this image gave them a feeling about, look, we're doing ICT. Because we have a smartphone with something on it, we have a logo, and we have a name. And this is a really important step in doing engineering, because you identified it. You made a nice wrap around it. And other people were already happy with this. We're done. It's there. Look, it's living and it's talking, and the guy is doing stuff. Working with a little bit further, we also thought about, okay, what would be a nice workflow? So what you see here, so this would be a farmer walking around on an environment, would identify trees, it goes to this guy, this application, and it would be an export to something else in CSV or Excel. That's like the semantic web for Africa. That's something they can open and do statistics on. So we actually build the application. So we put the logo on the start screen of an Android. And the idea is that you would see a map, see where you are. So this is in Mali. this one called CIS-VU. Nowadays not really safe to go, but a couple of years ago we went there. But you can see this is where I am. What you can do is zoom in and then identify trees. Take a picture and say, look, here is this kind of tree. So there were, I think there were something like 15 common trees. The only thing we did was to put them on a map, and they could say, look, here's a tree. And what we did there is we built the application, let the people work with it. We say, look, we got results. So you got this long addresses and the tree name. And you can do some nice statistics. So we did a small tour about the neighborhood, and we could say something about, look, this is how the trees look like. And it looks funny because the trees are in the river, but that's to do with the map itself, not about the borders. So if you zoom in, it's actually better. The nice thing of this application, so I think it took 2 days to talk about it. It's something like 6 hours to actually build it. So we built it there, we tested it there, and you could say like something like extreme program where the farmer would sit next to you and say, oh, it should be like this, or can you do that? And the nice thing about this application, what I would like to share with you, is that they came up with a list of the most commonly trees in Africa. They say, well, why can't you make an application that gives some information about the trees themselves? So, okay, we can do that. So what do? You take this tree name. So the idea is that this is the Latin name, and this is the name in Lambda. And if you go to the semantic web, it's full of information about trees. So I made this really small script. I can show this here, right? You know, software engineering. So the only thing this actually does is you look at Wikipedia pages if you can match the tree name. And if you don't find it, you try to find it at Wikipedia, and you download all the information that comes out of it. And you get something like this. So these are all the trees that I found. And I made this application called Arbor de Mine, trees of mining. And actually, I built this for one guy. He said, I want to have this application. Can you build it? I put it in the App Store and see what happens. I think that's 2 years ago. And actually, if I look now, it has been downloaded 10,000 times without any marketing, and it was free. And actually, a lot of Africans ask me, why didn't you ask money for this? 2 or 3 euros, because it's a nice application. Why didn't you do that? Oh, I didn't do it because I lost track of the application. I just built it there and I'll see what happens. And this is a little bit of a serendipity, but if you look at this, sustainability or business models, the first application in Nigeria has also been distributed, but it's too complex, too many steps with identifying trees, putting them in the CIS-VU, exploring it. But this is relatively simple. You get the 15 most commonly trees in Africa, and it is now used for Mali at school. So that's the first story. The other one was about rain. They said, oh, rain predictions are really, really poor in Africa. Can you do something smart with that? This is what we did in Burkina Faso, to in a sense something about the rainfall, changing climates. Well, that's all to do with finding water. You can see a vector trying to find water with a scope. And there's a lot of data about climate. All the satellite NASA, and they do all kind of investigation, but everything is really global, really with a low resolution. And then the only reasonable predictions you get is from airports. So the idea is that every airport has a, we call it grid system. And it's meant that if you want to land your plane, you know what kind of environments there are. There is some linked data knowledge about it. So somebody came up with a really complex model on how to store observations and predictions. And there are a lot of globally weather maps. So this one is, for example, Open Weather Map, and they give global predictions. And what we try to do is to see, okay, how about we give this global predictions to local people and ask them to give feedback. Is it any good? And actually, the straight answer is no, it's not any good. And we did the same. So we started with a mock-up. How about you show the observations, we give you the observation, and you give feedback that's whether it's good enough. Also, this was a nice idea, but still too complex to organize. The thing I want to show you is another example. When you see your hands in the back, this is an important guy, and he was really happy because somebody is holding this small device called a tipping bucket. Yeah, the idea about a tipping bucket is that you can make a small weather station relatively cheap. And the idea is that you have bad observation, weather observation, it's because you lack good local observations. And what this thing does, the tipping bucket, is that a little bit of water will fall here. If it's full, it will flip over, and you can count the number of tips. What we did here, so this is a weather station from Diallo. And what I would like to tell you about how this works. So the idea about the TAMO project, the Trans-African Hydrometeorological Observation, is to put a lot of relatively professional rain stations in Africa. And if you have all this, if you get all this data, you get a much better prediction model. And he asked me to install one of these devices there. And this is what you see here is where we present that we have brought one of these devices and how it works. And one of the things that they really like, everybody likes it because it's practical. You can hold it, you can point to it. And what you can see here is that this is the tipping bucket of this device. There is a radiation shield and a temperature measurement. And the idea is to show how it works. Is that you drop some water in the tipping bucket, and you can see that it actually calculates something. And at this team, they say, well, you know, we're not going to waste fresh water measuring this device. So this guy poured his cold coffee in the device, showing this scientific thing. and actually it survived. And I have to say that they were really happy with it. They say, you know, it has to work also in real life. But in the end, we put it up. So this is on the rooftop in Bordeaux. And this is one of the measurements. So the idea is that so the green one are the predicted values. The blue one is what actually measured. So you can see that there is a lot of difference. And for example, the rainfall is terrible. The prediction says never raining there, but it actually is. So here the idea was to actually show the difference between the measurements and the observations. We also created an application on top of that, made your mind. This one was also just build it. And the only thing it does is to display weather predictions from Open Weather Map. And this one is 2,000 times downloaded with any marketing at all. And if you look at them, it's downloaded from let's say locals there. So that concludes my story. That a lot of this work is this trial and error, and a lot of initiatives end up in something else. So it's really hard to think of a plan for let's do this, and this should work. If you go there, you will see that another initiative will become successful. And again, my lessons learned there. If you work with the locals, they are actually more innovative than if you look at let's say the European organization. So I think if you, for example, now go to the local ICT department of this university and say, how about we build a web application? The first reaction you will get is, why should we? We have Buienradar. And, or somebody else will say, we already tried that. Or somebody else wrote a paper on it. If you do it in Africa, everybody would say, yes, this would be really cool. Because it will change your lives if you do it right. And the nice thing there is that you still have to do the same things you have to do if you later on if you intend to pursue a career in companies. You still have to talk with French people who are not technicians, but they are marketing or operation or finance or something else. And actually, the trick I did in Africa is the same as I do with the fire department or with my class. It's just okay, who's involved in this problem? Who are the stakeholders? Who is the end user? And if I would create some ICT for you, how would you benefit it? How would it change it? So actually, if I build something in Africa, I'm not different. I only wear something different. I still have the same thing. I have to first understand what's going on, who's involved, and how can we fix it with ICT. But then, if you build it, you have to stand behind it and say, this is the solution. This is the only solution you can get. Sorry for being Trump, but sometimes you have to be really hard on that. So I think this is the solution, no hesitation behind it. The only drawback is that you have to take into account that things are really different there. So although there is a Wi-Fi connection or internet connection, it can get down for several days. Same with electricity. There's a lot of sand, and the other thing is that you're not sure about what kind of devices you will get. So this Android clones, some of them are nice, but most of them are actually a little bit crappy. And they say they are Samsung S5s or X6. They're just Chinese stuff. They operate, but they are just small, not really good devices. And the last thing, which is really terrible, so we talked to the local ICT companies, is that hosting is really a nightmare. There isn't reliable hosting. So it's either you have to do it yourself, so you just put a computer underneath your modem, but then the problem is, if the electricity is down, you don't have connection, and there aren't any companies for now offering that. So the local ICT companies, they all use Amazon or Google Cloud, and they do the hosting in Paris or in London. And if you want to know something more, please go to W4. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks. So it's really nice to hear I hope you hear a lot back of what we've been talking about understanding the user, and about actually that it's not that different from doing projects here. Of course, there's a lot of difference, but the steps are the same. And it's also, I think, really nice that we've been teaching the students one type of technology, and of course that's not the only one. That's just the only one we have time for. And it's really nice to also show that the smartphone apps also have a viable life in this domain. So very happy with that perspective as well. And of course, you can see that you can make money and become CEO if you do this long time. Are there any questions?
I may have missed the bigger picture, but what was the problem you were trying to solve? What was the use case you were trying to deal with the tree hanging app, for example? What was the practicality of it?
Oh, that's a good question. But the practicality was that we didn't know about any use case at all. So we just went there and said, let's deploy some technology.
And what was your goal?
Well, the goal was to get a use case out of them. So the tree use case is not something we came up with. We taught them to define a use case. And I totally agree, because from a technical point of view, making a tree app is, you build it in 4 hours. There is no challenge in that. The challenge is to have them, the locals, define that problem and also understand how you do this process. So actually, the technical part was marginal. So the lesson learned there is, if you want to do this rural engineering, you have to really talk a lot with people and locals, and then distillate the actual technical problem. You build something, and you have to talk a lot to explain how it works and work with it. That's the bigger picture.
Right. So technically, I don't have any questions about the technicality of the app. My question is, what was your incentive to do this, to go there and deploy and find the use case and deploy an application?
All right.
What was your motivation?
Well, one of the motivations is that from an economical point of view, so like, I don't know how many new app users, and the app market is, in Europe it's overflowed. There are zillions and zillions of applications. In Africa, there are barely any. So my idea is, what happens if I stop building applications in Europe and compete with a lot of other app companies and be one of the first that develops apps in Africa? That's my incentive. It will be my ticket out of Amsterdam.
And also one other follow-up to your question about the trees. So what I remember is that people were interested in knowing how many trees were on the piece of land that they were working on, because they wanted to monitor a change over time, if there were more trees or less trees coming. And the farmers were very interested in knowing what trees were where, so having that to monitor somewhere. So let's say that there was a case for the user that we didn't know before.
You had 10,000 downloads for the app in a pretty short time span, and you got some feedback from the users.
Yeah.
Did you happen to do a survey and ask the users how they were using the app, why they wanted to download?
No.
What they
No, this is serendipity. I built this application just out of a, let's say, hackathon or something like that, and just publish it, and it doesn't cost any money. And actually, well, I got some feedback back. So one guy saying, why didn't you ask any money for it? And somebody else said, well, we are really happy with this because we can use it for education. I'm really happy with it because there's some offline component in it. We can use it anywhere, and it's really designed. We actually got a lot of positive feedbacks, which is also different from the European feedbacks, because Europeans tend to only say when something is wrong. So they always get only negative responses. But there you only get positive responses. Nice, really cool, and stuff like that. And the point is that, so it's not my incentive to make a business model out of this little tree app. It just, it happens to be, I don't know if it goes successful, it's just a bunch of downloads. But I don't know who these people are. I know, so you can say, well, would you please fill it in? But then you can ask, oh, do you like the app? Yeah, I like the app. Okay. What would you change? Well, perhaps the course. No. Well, I don't think there is any business in that or any scientific gain to look at why they download it. I think people download it because that's the main tree in it, or Mali, or a specific kind of tree. I think that's the way they found it.
To what extent do people use this in rural areas? Because I think in cities it's much easier to have the money to buy a smartphone, have the electricity to charge it again, to have the knowledge of how to use an iPhone, how to use an iPhone, how to use a smartphone.
Yeah.
And handle the menus. So I would say that people in the city are much more likely to use this than the real intended users, people in the rural areas.
Yeah. Well, the best answer would be we should go there and look around and see how they use it. So for the people we have been talking to, they say, look, we first had nothing, and now we have a device that knows the time, that has a calculator, I can phone, and and there are also applications. For them, it's really one of the most important things, like us. And if there is a need for something, there are practical solutions for that. So you have people that are business in this to charge funds. And they built a tree apps that you thought we can download it via Wi-Fi, and you can use it. You can use it offline. But the electricity is an issue, and the other thing you can ask, if you're going to build an application that people have to pay for, you probably don't have farmers themselves, but it's somebody who's let's say a manager or extension workers or NGOs. So a lot of the applications I'm now building are for NGOs or research projects because they have some money and they will organize things like electricity.
So you really focus also on offline users.
Yeah, but I think it's just a matter of time, because the other thing that's going on is called mobile banking. So these people have nothing. Now they have a smartphone, and you can also do mobile banking with them. So the telecom providers invest a lot of money in really good 4G networks. They have a better 4G network than here in Amsterdam or Utrecht. So everywhere you go, you have really good connection. Only the data transfer now is very expensive, but I think in a couple of years it will be payable.
All right. Then Chris, I'd like to thank you again.
Thank you.
To you as a chief head. Thanks a lot for a really enlightening talk. So we have a coffee break now, so please stretch your legs. We start again in 20 minutes with 3 shorter talks. So I see you after the break.
That's the last question you asked about the uses in the cities. The thing is that we don't have like that. No one in the city wants to count cheese. You don't even look at the trees in the city. Yeah, of course. One quality is
How are you? I don't know. And so we want people, we were sort of people yes. Yeah. That's one and it may also have to do with something with and COVID. Yeah, also to prevent some of those styles to push Yeah.
Yes. I should just thank Adam and Victor for inviting me to.
Yes, I already probably get one comment there. Ik denk dat zelfs belangrijkste dingen van mensen die Hij is zelfs goed, dus er zijn er die verbindingen. Ja, precies. Ja, daar was het niet zo. Maar dat mag zo, dus dat gaat van als we kunnen mee dus kijk eens, ja, nee, maar dus het ja, nou ja, dus het zijn. Wat doet die app ook? Of je ouder gaat, dan moet je dus ik weet niet wat ja. Wat doe je hier nou? Wat doe je naast deze dingen? Ja. Uiteindelijk ook het heel goed staan in de logistiek. En een mooie opkomst. Ja. Wij doen het. Nee, wij doen 15 jaar. Het loopt duur. Ja. Andere mensen doen het. Dus nu toe, het is een beetje zo'n slee die heel je ziet ook hoe die jongens gaan zitten. Ja, dat zijn jullie dan en de overheid, dus ik heb de gegeven landschap in de toekomst, zei dan. De overheid anders staan niet in zullen doen, maar er staan de dingen die ze willen bereiken. Dus doen we. Dus de gegevens opvragen bij de bron. Direct links tussen de bron, als wij niet hier tussen staan. Dus dan wordt het helemaal. Ik weet dat, dit is een secundaire kopie.
Wetenschappers, dat is niet een MBO, geld uitgeven voor intuïtieve wetenschappers, sociale wetenschappers, data delen, geestwetenschappers, levenswetenschappers, die maak ik allemaal. Ja, dat is dan toch doen. Ja, maar wat gaan we nog doen? Wat wij doen is in plaats van het dingen bouwen, dus dat Semantic heeft grote vragen, dus studeren. Ja, dus ze zijn er nu. Dus nu wordt het zo'n object gaan studeren. Als het gaat en ze gaan, hoe zien ze het nou? Wat betekent het? Waarom zien ze het niet? Sommige mensen proberen het 5 die learning, je telt die tegenwoordig niet mee. Ik denk ook, hebben we derde slide in één keer niet meer. Oh, oké. Je moet geen nieuw learning, je helpt in die kant. Oh ja, die Semantic. Oh, ja. Deze week is het AI bijna synoniem geworden met machine learning. Ja, het lijkt wel een steeds sneller. En hoe is het met de commodities? Nou ja, we zijn het afgelopen. Dat is wel goed. Nou, we gaan maar binnen voor de klant. Oké. Nee, dat is niet waar. Maar dit is juist goed. Nee, precies. Nee, maar Aart heeft niet zo'n eigen dingen. We hebben gewoon zo'n concreet probleem. Dus dat is gewoon dus het kost heel veel water. Je kunt er zo'n neerzetten. Er komt heel veel water uit. En het water moet oplossen. Dus we willen wel weten wanneer we die water aan hecten moeten verleden. Dat is heel simpel. Heb je het ook. Ik ook kijken van nou, hoe lang heb je aangestaan. Dan kan je waarschijnlijk zo doen. Goed, ik wil dat geen zin uitlezen. Ja, dat is wel zijn dat zijn al bekend als wel een wat doen waren jullie al bij jou gekomen? Ja, hier hebben we van een keer vanuit. We hebben steeds nog vanuit. En ja, we zijn natuurlijk ook heel veel logistiek instellingen. We zijn gewoon een ding vanuit de logistiek sector, dat is eigenlijk wel afhankelijk. Dus bijvoorbeeld zo'n pakket die zegt GLS, dat is een soort en dat werkt gewoon goed. Het is gewoon, je hebt gewoon een heel groot magazijn. En dan heb je pakjes in zo'n postcode en dan flikken ze gewoon alle pakketjes die er naartoe moeten. Dan moet de chauffeur komen en die moet dan de optimale route gaan bepalen. Ja, waar? Dat meen je niet? Nee, dat meen ik ook. Je zou dus denken dat die ondertussen wat verder waren. Nee, maar dus zeg ik, het grootste probleem is dat de pakketjes zijn niet goed gecommuniceerbaar. Want wat ook dat neerleggen wordt met de hand gedaan. Dat is gewoon een aflevering van pakketlabels. Dus je hebt dus gewoon 5 mensen in Nederland die gaan leveren. Of 5 mensen gaan naar buiten. En niemand staat dus eigenlijk wat ik dan weer voor mensen die flikken gewoon erin. En dan is het gewoon, ja, dat kunnen ze eigenlijk zeer als het dus op een soort uitzicht. Ik denk, ja, dat is gewoon ja, dat is toch wel leuk. Wel heel divers. Je moet er wel naartoe van de huisbeest. Het was eigenlijk was het een systeem. Het was een systeem dat werkt op zijn Duits. En het Duits is weer aan de systeem. Dus dat was de opdracht is, het werkt op zijn Duits. We willen zonder de Duitse methode. Als je Duits zegt, geen Duitse methode, ja. Ik weet het wat het betekent. Ik heb een leuke domein Duits. Dat is wel een leuke. En wat we nu zien is dat we wel vaak voor de andere kiezers iets met zijn van een beetje voor Afrika. En doen dus met weerspel samen. Nee, maar ja. Ik denk dat we heel dingen zijn hoort. Ja, dat alles ook wordt. Dan nu weer even met al die baan. Ja,
Okay, we want to start in 1 or 2 minutes, so please take your coffee to your seats. Francis, I think we both. You want to? Get your water?
Okay, so the next speaker is Francis Dittoh. Francis is our colleague, part you know him from the course that you have seen already his lecture last Thursday, which I missed unfortunately. Well, for the people who don't know Francis, we started working in 2011, I think, when we met first in Ghana, when we were doing a roadshow and talking to a lot of people about our projects to build ICTs for rural development. And Francis happened to be a computer scientist already at that time, looking for to do a master's in the Netherlands, and he wanted to go to Maastricht, and we said no, don't go to Maastricht, come to Pru, and that's what he did, and we were very happy because we're still working together. So now he's doing his PhD, as you know, on Meteo for rural development, but his talk today will be about something else, about well, you will introduce that. So the floor is yours, Francis.
Thank you. All right. So well, I'm still talking about Mr. Meteo, but I just want to. Well, we're talking about sustainability, and want to look at it in the lines of sustainability. Actually looking at two different things. The first one is the idea of sustainability of rural folk or of African people. The second is the sustainability of the projects themselves. Right. So now we are doing these projects because we want to improve the sustainability of the people. So we're talking about the things that would help them be sustainable throughout their years of living. But also it means that the projects that we do must be sustainable in themselves. Else it doesn't help them in any way. And so I'm just using the project I'm doing as an example to talk about how we can work in a way that is sustainable. All right. So the question is, what's sustainability? So so let's assume there are two people. They need to go from point A to point B, let's say every single day, and they need our help to get. Every morning, or let's say every afternoon, they need to go from point A to point B. Now they ask us for help. What can we do? So, so we're going to say, okay, we have a very state-of-the-art bus, 100-seater with luggage compartments, high-speed, onboard gaming system, air condition. We just give it to them, and then we solve their problem. All right. This is what has been done. Well, this is an analogy of what has been done over the years. You just find the best solution and then give it to the people and then say, okay, go ahead. Right now, the problem is that after doing this, you realize that, okay, first of all, there were just 2 people. They don't need a 100-seater bus. They don't have any hand luggage, so they didn't need a luggage compartment anyway. They don't mind spending some time on the road. They don't really need a bus that's that fast. They have no idea what the game is. They've never played the game, and they have no intention of playing a computer game. They probably prefer fresh air to the AC. And they don't have enough income to be able to buy fuel and to maintain the vehicle. So at the end, that vehicle, you might go back several days later to find it parked somewhere because they would not use it. Right? And this is an example of what has been going on. There has been a lot of dumping of computers and giving stuff to people to use, and it doesn't help because you don't really know exactly what they need. And thankfully, the previous talk kind of dealt a little bit with this, the idea of finding out exactly what is needed and then giving it to the people. All right, so because of that, for that reason, in ICT4D, we learned that we need to be user-centered, even more user-centered than normal. All right, it's true that all technology is supposedly user-centered, but in ICT4D, we need to even do that even more than is required. So from the onset, we start with the end users. We don't start with ourselves. We go to the end users. Like he said previously, I'm sure the question that was, I think the last question was probably wondering, why did you make an app to count trees? But you simply do it because that's what they want. That's what they need. And they tell you what they want. Although it might not make sense to you or you don't understand why they need it, but then that's what they want, right? And then it should be adaptive because you'd have to change a lot of things. Right? As you start to create your solution for them, it has to conform to so many things that you didn't think about originally, and so it must be adaptive and it must be specifically relevant for people who are in the class. I mean, you've heard this a lot, so I won't take too much time with that. And then, of course, we are doing all this for development. And now, an easy way to define development is just to show you the development goals. So these are the sustainable development goals. So you see no poverty and zero hunger, good health, quality education, all these things. Sustainable cities and communities, that's number 11. Number 13, climate action. Things like these are the aim of all what we are doing, of what basically everybody in development is doing. Right? So we in ICT for Development, our aim is to meet some or all of these things. Right, so we have our ICT components. These are just examples. Of course, they are far more than this. So we have all these ideas and all these concepts and all these technologies that we can use. So the question is, how exactly do we go about it? We've talked about a lot of these things during the course, and now the question is, practically, what do you do? How exactly do you now implement all these things? We've been doing it with technology. We've written a lot of software and done a lot of things, but on the ground, how exactly do we go about putting all these things together? So we go back to first of all to the field. So what happened is I think this was 2014. We had a workshop. Almost all the people who have spoken here were probably at that workshop, or who have spoken to you during the course were at this workshop. So went to northern Ghana. We spent, most of the time in a town called Wendelien, where we had a workshop. So we had people from ICT4D, from the group, and we had computer science people from the university there. We had people from agriculture, agribusiness, food security, gender experts, radio people, and we'll come to the rural communities after that. So we met with all these people, and then we start to discuss. Right, so we don't go there with a solution, we go there with a discussion. So the question is, what could we provide for the community, especially in terms of information, right? Our aim is to facilitate the communication and information. So the question is, what can we give to the community? And we did a lot of things. We came up with a lot of ideas, and the food security people would give you a whole lot of things. The agriculturists would give you some other things. Computer scientists would say something else. Right, then we put all these things together, and finally we went to a village near that town called Guabliga. Now, at that village, we now kind of present the general idea to them and tell them this is the general idea of what we can do. So what are your needs in terms of information? Right, so that's the question we more or less the question we asked them. And then one interesting thing to note at Guabliga was that we first started out putting everybody together to have a kind of group discussion. And then we suddenly realized that the women were doing all the talking and the men didn't get the chance to say anything, right? Which was very strange because I mean, we hear of gender stuff a lot, and sometimes we feel when we get to rural areas, the women would not have a say. But here was the case that the women were doing all the talking and the men were just like, they couldn't bring up anything. So at the end, we had to separate them and take the women aside so the men could talk. All right. So so eventually we spoke with them and came up with some things that they felt were important. And that is where Mr. Micho came in. Throughout talking with them, what came up was that in previous years, they had their own indigenous methods of determining what would happen in terms of weather. Right, so they can simply look at the trees and look at the animals and their movements and stuff like that and figure out that this is what would happen. Right? This is, I mean, you can see the correlation to, let's say, African traditional medicine. This is a traditional way of determining weather. Right. But what they realized and what they told us is that in the recent years, it has become more difficult to do. Of course, these are people who do not probably have never heard of the term global warming or global weirding, but they've experienced it. So already they can tell us that all right, our indigenous methods are no longer working very well, and this is because we all know the reason why. At least we as scientists understand why this is happening. Right. Now I use global weirding because the conditions in our weather these days causes warming, but causes cooling in other places and causes so many crazy things that some people have decided to turn to weirding instead of warming. And they were looking for that reason they wanted weather information. And also of course I also mentioned it's user-centered because it's something that was requested from the farmers. All right, so now we had all these things, and so we want to put them together. So now we have a use case. Please, this is just a visualization. This is not a standardized visualization. I just put things together. So we have all these technologies, and then we have our use case. So now we have the idea that we need weather information. We are thinking of wind and wind direction and temperature and rain and humidity and all those things that constitute weather. All right, and of course these things are all influenced by the various components from ICT4D that we want to involve in them. Now, once we start talking with local NGOs and institutions and the radio stations, then things start to change a bit. And as I said, we need to be adaptive. So you realize that all of a sudden things like audio become more important. We suddenly realize that radio is a bit important, but mobile is probably far more important, because the NGOs and the institutions there will tell you that if these things are not the end users you're talking about only have mobile phones, right? Well, in the previous listing, he mentioned about smartphones, but there are so many people, especially in the areas where we went to. These are, I mean, really inside there where they do not have smartphones. Right? So mobile phones are important. Then you suddenly realize that, okay, 2G, 3G, 4G It's probably possible, but not in the way you thought, meaning that the end users don't have it, but maybe you can still use it some other way. Same with internet. What else? You realize that things like local context and language and of course sustainability are far more important. All right, let me make this a bit more simple. All right, so I just remove our IST components. Of course, these things will be used, but we understand what they are. Things like XML and our hardware and our software are important, but then we put them aside so that we can see a better picture. So, for example, now we have things like privacy and security. You suddenly realize that the end users are not as concerned about things like privacy and security as you would think. All right, so things like that start being of less concern than the rest. Something like internet is available in some places and not available in other places. So you could use it, but you might not be able to. And so you kind of start to have a general idea of what you can do and what you can't do. And then finally, you go back to the end user. So what I'm doing is I'm currently working with some institutions and the university I work with to kind of go back to the end users and then find out again. So, all right, what we've finally arrived at this. What do you think about it? And then well, from this is from Ghana. One thing you realize that even within, we always say Africa, but within the different communities in Africa, there's vast differences. Right? So in the places that I have spoken with the farmers, you suddenly realize that things like they are not interested in things like your exposure or humidity or wind direction even. So it starts to influence the use case a little bit more. All right, so at the end, I end up with this. All right, so I'm just trying to show that at each step, the people involved, all the stakeholders involved, kind of modify what you're doing. In this case, we're talking about the media application. But regardless of what application it is, regardless of what use case it is, at each step, they are going to modify it in one way or another. And this is going to actually be iterative in the sense that even after it's deployed in the field, we're going to go back again, almost back to the beginning. And you realize that it starts to change again, right? Because they would suddenly realize that, okay, we asked for, let's say, rain, and okay, we need it in this way and not that way. For example, we've been talking about numbers and labels. So, for example, we got feedback from Mali and Burkina, and one of the things that I noticed was that they said was that at first we were saying that we didn't want numbers when we talked about the measurements, and then suddenly realized that they're saying that for people who are inputting data, they would understand the numbers, and for those who are receiving it, some might not understand. So all of a sudden you realize that, okay, so people who would put in whether the information might actually have rain gauges that measure. So because of that, they actually understand the numbers. And those who do not have these stuff and probably don't understand would not know what maybe 12 millimeters of rain is. Right, so this kind of continuously modifies the whole. All right, so this is simply Mr. Meteor. So from all this stuff, knowing all this, we arrived at creating Mr. Meteor, which is simply, of course not simply, but taking information, online information, national meteor, and then local weather stations, and then putting them in there. Of course, this kind of brings another problem because, as mentioned before, we realize that the weather information services are not so good. First of all, there are hardly any local weather stations. The online weather information is mostly from satellite systems, so they are not that accurate. And then the national meteor services, for example, in Ghana, do not give daily information, of course, because they also don't have weather local stations to take data from anyway. And so most of the time, they'll probably give seasonal information. Just recently, what I learned is that the farmers actually say they are interested even in the seasonal information. So at the beginning of the season, they actually would want to know what the seasonal forecast is. Right, so every national meteor would normally give a whole season forecast for the season. And even that alone would help them. So already we have some information we can give to them. Right. Personally, I would like to have more, which would mean that we need to find a way of making this a bit better than it is, because as we've mentioned, it is not that accurate. One of the solutions is to actually create local weather stations, which, well, is a bit beyond the scope of this at the moment. Now, of course, we provide this with voice to the rural people. All right, so what we are doing now is I'm working with two cool monkeys with Chris, with the University for Development Studies is where I work. And then Savannah Agricultural Research Institute is they are an institute that's actually based also in the city I am in, and they have always worked with rural farmers. And once they heard that we're doing this, they are actually very interested in taking part. And then Radio Savannah is like the major radio station in the whole northern Ghana. Luckily for me, the day I went to have a meeting with the Agricultural Research Institute, somebody from the radio station happened to be there, and so I was lucky enough to just add them into it. And of course, the local farmers. Right, so, well, I think for those who have been in the course, you understand exactly what this is saying. For anyone who wasn't there, quickly, all we are doing is picking information from, well, for here and from the web, and then from our meteorological service, and integrating it into our Casadaka, which would create a voice service which the farmers can call into. So in this particular use case, this would either be hosted at the university or at the research institute, where we are sure, well, at the university we have internet connection, and we have 4 campuses, which from the central we must provide internet for those 4 campuses. So our internet is, well, I'd say 90% of the time up, because if it's not, the other campuses cannot have internet. So at least once it is hosted there, we are sure that at least it would almost always work. I can't say always, but almost always. All right, so basically this is what I'm doing. All right, so back to sustainability. So the reason why I've talked about all these things and how to put them together is because we are trying to create a sustainable model. Right now, maybe I should go back here. And now the idea here is that we must find a way of sustaining this and making sure that it works after the whole project is done. That is the main reason for including all these people. Savannah Agricultural Research Institute and the university are going nowhere. They've been there for years and they'll be there for years. If we can involve them and make sure they are an integral part of it, that means that they can keep sustaining this for years. The research institute, over the years, what they already do is actually give information to farmers. That is their job. Right? They work with farmers, they give information to them. So basically, we are creating a service to improve what they already do anyway. So we can be sure that they would have the need or the interest in making sure that this keeps running. Right? So this is, well, I have found easy way of sustaining it by finding something like that, but in other cases it might not be so simple. Now with them, we will probably determine how this would work, who would be charged for what, because definitely there's still cost somewhere, whether they will take on all the charge. One of the things that influences all these things is, for example, politics influences things like this. Changes in governmental budgets and election cycles would influence the sustainability of the project itself. An interesting thing to note here is that the Savannah Agricultural research institute actually works with USAID. Their funding comes from USAID. Now the problem is that Trump is cutting the budget for things like that, which is reducing the amount of money that would be given to USAID, meaning that the funding for even the Cellular Laboratory Institute would also go down or is affected by it. So you can even realize that the politics of the US still affects my work, and affects the sustainability of the project in Africa. Right? So it's not just the politics of the country itself, but the politics all over the world kind of in turn affects it. Of course, there's also the legal frameworks. For example, we had this idea, well, we're still working on it. The idea is, I don't know who has heard of RDS, Radio Data Systems. Anyone ever? Well, probably just one person. It's quite very, very old. So if I don't know if it still happens, but people who had these old radio sets that had display screens, you see the song that's played on the radio displays on it. If you've ever seen something like that. Right now, what they actually do is that they're actually transmitting data from the radio station, right? And that is how it gets on your device, right? So we're thinking that actually this is a good way of transmitting data, right? Because the data that we need they're very small amounts. We are just transmitting. We are just saying that the rain for tomorrow is 12 millimeters. The temperature is 36. I mean, that is a very tiny amount of data. It can easily be transmitted over FM frequencies. But now, of course, there's the legal problem. Would you be allowed to do it? Honestly, I've still not gotten an answer yet from the National Communication Authority in Ghana, because nobody seems to have the answer to whether I can do it legally or not. So it's still hanging there. So these are things that affect it, because if we can do this, we actually solve one problem of data transfer, because we know that the data requirements are not that big. Right? But legally, it's kind of hanging there, and they could say, no, legally you're not allowed to, and that means that the super perfect solution to sustainability is kind of destroyed. And of course, managerial, there must be people to manage this, and we've talked about this all over the time, including the IT side, there must be experts, but also including the financial side. Right, because these institutions and people who will be able to scale this up and work on this must be able to manage it effectively. Otherwise, it loses sustainability. Unfortunately, these are not problems that I have solutions to. I'm just mentioning them so that you would know that these affect sustainability. Social sustainability, of course, we've mentioned this already from the whole context, to make sure that we start with the users and they have an interest in it. Since we have taken the use case from them, we ensure that this is somewhat covered. And then, of course, transparency, accountability, and good governance are very important in all these things. If we can ensure that these things work, then everything works out well. Of course, these things are very difficult, and so it becomes a problem to make it work. So back to our note on sustainability. So instead of giving the people a whole bus, what we have rather done is to go to them and ask them, okay, what do you need? You want to go from point A to point B. How best do you think you'd be able to do that? And they tell us, okay, we can probably build bicycles from bamboo, and then we rather do that instead of providing a whole bus that needs fuel. And basically, if you could do that, then that solves the problem. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Francis. Very insightful talk, and very nice that we actually can connect to the theme of this year, which is really good. Yeah, for those of you interested, tomorrow will be the sustainability day here at VU, and Francis will also highlight this from his point of view. But now there's room for one or two questions.
So is this already deployed, Mr. Dittoh, or is it still a work in progress?
No, not yet deployed. Still working.
Right.
It will be deployed this year. Else hands will ahead. Yeah, but so once it will be deployed in certain regions in northern Ghana. The research institute actually wants us to start off with the major language in the area, which would be kind of easy to do, so that we can test it out with the people before kind of going to the smaller. So the major language is Dagbani, which a lot of people speak, and it would be kind of easy to translate and all that. But of course, there are all these smaller languages that will be more technical, more difficult to do. So once we're done with that, then we can move on to. So luckily, the rainy season starts now. So once I'm actually back in Ghana in 3 weeks, so once I get back there, we start.
So how's your experience working with local weather institutes? Don't they think that you are doing their job, and it should be their job to distribute weather information to the whole population?
Funny enough, actually the exact opposite, because I spoke with the research institute actually have someone in charge of Meteo, and they actually have a few local weather stations. And he was actually more interested in it because you see they have this problem where they need to get information to these people, and they try to do their best, but there are these, I mean, you can imagine that there are villages scattered all over the place, and it's difficult to get everywhere. So in Ghana, what we have these agricultural extension officers, and it's their job to kind of go around and then talk to people and then see the farmers and meet them. But it's so difficult doing it all the time, right? Because you can imagine that if we are talking about weather information, you can't go around with tomorrow's weather and then the next day go around. That means you keep going around every single day. It's kind of just impossible, right? So it is actually in their interest. They actually want to have this information out there. And well, they know that you are kind of a go-between. You are not kind of taking their job, you're just facilitating communication. So.
Okay, then I think we should thank you again for a wonderful talk. Even though you're already partly Dutch, at least half Dutch, I think there's always more to learn about. Yeah. Things more to eat. So thanks again, and we'd just like to go to penultimate speaker, Wendelien. So Wendelien is a VU consultant, sorry, or advisor, I think, officially on sustainable land management. So she is actually a member of the W4RA and always keeps us very much in check, and that we're actually also solving real sustainable land issues and not just focusing on IT. She has also served as your proxy applicant test person for a lot of your applications. But now she'll actually give us some more insight in her, I would say, day job in issues around sustainability for land management.
Okay, good morning everybody. So yes, I'm working at the VU International office together with Anna, and I do projects in farmer innovation, also sustainable land management. And I give a course, Environment and Development. This is a new minor. Okay, today, well, the time is very short, so I will try to keep it short. It's a bit about African agriculture. There's a lot of potential for African agriculture to increase its productivity and to also improve the food security. But how do we do this? Of course, there are several options. There's not one road, yeah? So I basically sketched two perspectives on how to do this. And the first one is based on the model. Oops. No, that's too fast. It's based on this model. So this is an industrial agribusiness. I think most of you will be more or less acquainted with this type of model, because it's done in Europe and the whole West. It's also in Africa and in America. It's large scale, it's monoculture, and the key thing is maximizing your production. It's mainly cash crops. Well, that's the idea for Africa then. And it has high external inputs, so chemical, fertilizer, pesticides, so it needs a lot of inputs. Talking about sustainability in the long run, do you think this is a sustainable system model?
I already know.
Nobody dares to say that. Who thinks yes? Someone in the long term? What is the? Someone no? Okay. No. Why no?
Well, because if you have large farms where you grow your crops, and that can also lead to deforestation, something you heard a lot, which on the long run will decrease the fertility of the crop.
Yeah, that's why you need a lot of fertilizer also, because of the monocropping.
And also there are negative influences on the biodiversity there, because if that gets into the soil and into the water, and a lot of algae can grow. You can get a lot of problems from this kind of agriculture.
It's not the best for the environment, is it? Yeah. So it has a negative impact also in the long run on the environment, and you need, so in order to get this going, because it's depleting the soil, you need these fertilizer species, and it's also very easy to get pests and weeds, so you need these pesticides in order to continue the system. Okay, nevertheless, this model is an idea by the G8. Do you know which countries? Happen to know which countries? Well, I should maybe say now G7, because one of them is suspended basically. But who are inside this counterpart of countries? Have you an idea? US? Yes, of course, the US, that's one. Who else?
Germany.
Germany, yeah. Japan, exactly. France.
China.
No. Not China. Italy? Italy, yes, I was really surprised. I didn't know it myself, so I checked it yesterday. I was like, Italy? Oh, that's interesting. But then we have 5 or something. We still have a couple of the more.
Canada?
Yes, Canada.
Russia.
Yes, but they're suspended, so they are the 8. So it's a bit like 7 and a half. Maybe with Trump now they can join again. I don't know. No idea. And did we say UK, Germany, France? Italy? I think we have them. Yeah. So basically, they're what you see is European countries and American. Okay, so they are having this plan. So African agriculture needs to be modernized. We have to modernize this agriculture because they're lagging behind, and this has been done also in Asia, for instance, and Africa should also come. So I won't tell that it's exactly the way the model describes, but it's based on that model with high inputs on fertilizer and chemical and pesticides. And so they launched in 2012 the new Alliance for Food Security and Nutrition. And some other big donors are also in this club. They joined. So the Dutch government, for instance, and the Danish government are also part of this to push this, and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for instance. So they are behind this idea, this thought, this perspective. And the central, key role is played for private companies, because public money has been spent for years in development, but nevertheless, there's still poverty in Africa, there's still food insecurity. So apparently, there needs to be done something else. So now it is private sector, the silver bullet, they will resolve it. So they get a key role. And by doing this, what needs to be done, because if you're a private company, you want to go to Africa and do business, and you want to exploit or to do agriculture, you need land, okay? So you need access to land. So they want governments in Africa to make policies to enable business and development by private investment from foreign companies. So they have to make their policies favorable to private investment abroad. And also, they give them tax favor. So then they don't need to pay tax or very low taxes for many years. And there's public money from the donors, so from the Dutch government, the Danish government, put into this exercise. So public money goes into this as well. That's what you call under private. Okay. And these are the assumptions, that they need to, the African agriculture needs to be boosted, so it will really create a better food productivity, more jobs for people, that's what they claim, and it will also give farmers access to agricultural credits, transportation will be taken care of, and in the end, food security, everybody happy. Okay, what do you think? Is this a win-win situation? In Africa, the main farmers are small farmers, so they need to somehow find their way together with these big corporations. What kind of issues would you see? Who would be winning in this type of approach?
The larger corporations.
Okay, why?
Because they are probably producing a lot more, which means their prices will be lower. A small farmer who only produces so much can't compete with their prices, so he'll probably stick to farming for his own needs and not for selling his crops.
Yeah, interestingly, one of the things that they mainly grow cash crops, which are for the global market, whereas small farmers usually grow food crops for the local markets. So in that sense, it wouldn't need to compete, but still, yes, they are very well organized. They get access to land where farmers used to live beforehand. So that's an issue. I don't know if you have heard about land grabbing. No, it's a big deal. That's all done with the. So this is this enabling of environment, agricultural environment by the government. They create these favorable conditions for these big enterprises, which makes, of course, small farmers very vulnerable. They are already vulnerable, but in this situation, yeah, they're vulnerable. And to give you an example, slide before you see here I put this is Olam. Do you know Monsanto? Maybe some of you. Good. It's big agribusiness, very influential. Olam is also a very big enterprise agribusiness. They grow coffee, cocoa, cotton, fertilizers, and they're all over. They're heading in headquarters in Singapore, but they have projects also all over Africa. And this is one example. I saw this in a documentary. It's distributed that was broadcasted by Aart. Very interesting. It's exactly about this relationship between these private partners and these public partnerships, and what is the effect for local farmers. So this is in a village in Tanzania. So they got, they bought 2,000 hectares from a former company who had still problems with farmers that were wiped out. So you see on their website also that they still have to resolve these disputes with the farmers that have been removed. Coffee is a crop that needs a lot of water, so you need irrigation, and most of Africa's land agriculture is rain-fed agriculture, not irrigation. So they needed to, so what they did is building a dam to store the rainwater, which cost, this was an investment of 2 million euro. But hey, they received money from the donors, so that should be, you see, so the donors are the Dutch Development Bank and GIZ of Germany, so they're big donors. Including, well, basically with our money as well, so it's including public money. And they said they claim to improve the livelihoods, yeah? The number of workers at the plantation is about 400, which is not that bad. There are other plantations that they are much more mechanized. Coffee is not so, because they do it by hand for harvesting, so also during harvesting there are more people. The wages are $2 a day. Wow. It's just above, you know, the absolute minimum. But if you have a family with 4 children, which many people have in Tanzania, you cannot sustain your livelihood. So telling that they really, you know, are for food security and better livelihoods. Then there is another, so they have an irrigated field, plantation, but they have another contract. They have contract farmers as well. So you don't need to come as a worker. You can stay on your own land. You as a farmer, as a local farmer, you have your own field. And the manager of this project says very proudly, we give them seedlings for free. So they reserve like 3 million seedlings, or this is what they intend to do, giving them to villagers. You think, wow, that's nice. I get coffee plants for free. 1,800, there was one man that received 1,800 coffee plants. So he can put this on his field. This is coffee, and they're seedlings. It takes a coffee plant 4 years to grow before it gives coffee beans. So this is an investment of 4 years. He received, so the beans, or the plants, sorry, for free, also training. But the transport he had to pay for himself, of course, and the fertilizer, which cost him 80 euros for 4 sacks. So that he has to invest in this. Because it needs the fertilizer. There's another issue, like I said, they have no irrigation on their fields. So on this plantation, of course, there is irrigation, but the farmers in their own plots, they don't have this irrigation. So what he had to do was dig a well very deep and get the water with a bucket, and he was watering his coffee every day with a bucket. So that is very labor intensive, as you can imagine. So if you would be a local farmer, would you stand up in line to get these coffee plants, or what would you do? And there's one other thing, it competes with your food crops, of course. People, some villagers, or many villagers said, we don't do this because we cannot eat coffee. And we cannot plant anything else anymore. So, would you, as a farmer? Okay. So is this a win-win situation for farmers, smallholder farmers who have, they don't have invested financial capital to invest? I mean, there are farmers who can, but most small farmers, really small farmers, don't. So what the thing is this company, you have a contract. That's another story. After 4 years, you can receive the first money because you have your beans, but the price that you will get is decided by the company, is fixed by the company at the time of the harvest. So all this time, you don't get anything. This is investment by the farmer and not by the company. And then you have to take their fertilizer. So you get into this spiral. And So as a farmer, you take the risks and you lose your autonomy. Because once you are in this cycle, it's very hard to get out because you are in debt. Because of the loans for the fertilizer. Okay, so yeah, I put the link down. There is you can see the whole documentary, which is very interesting. There's many case studies in Zambia and other countries, Kenya as well. And yeah, all in all, it's not very positive for small farmers. Okay, there's another approach, another model, which is more common in Africa, but it's considered to be backward by some people. This is small-scale agriculture, so it's not more than 10 hectares per family farm. They have crop diversification, so many different crops. When we visit farmers in Burkina and in Mali, many of them have all kinds of crops. It's very biodiverse also, and they have very many different seeds. They exchange seeds with each other. It's very labor-intensive. But it's very low on chemical inputs, so they don't pay for that. Most of it is organic. And it's not very mechanized. And what they do, it's not maximizing the profit and productivity, but it's more risk spreading, which is already also something good for climate resilience. So there are several studies. FAO is very much in favor of this. You can see it also on their website. And surprisingly, or maybe not, maybe yes, but 70% of the food that we consume is produced by small farmers worldwide. And in Africa, it's even 80%. So that is interesting. And yet they don't get that much support because most of the money, subsidies, and so all these investment by donors goes to big companies and agribusiness. And the thing, well, that's another thing. Many people say there's not enough food in the world, but it's more a question of distribution and accessibility and inequality also. And here you see one of the farmers. He's a farmer innovator. Well, he's also farmers innovate as well. Small farmers. It's interesting. I have this. Yeah, this is a publication. It's very recent. It's published by the World Bank, who are pushing the other model very much. And so the mechanization and the private companies. But on the same time, in this, they have a case study in this report on Mali, agriculture in Mali. And there's quite some interesting remarks, or what I found in there. They see organic fertilizer as a large positive effect. So that's interesting, of course, because that there are not so many studies and there's not so much data on informal farming. But so this is interesting to see. And what is also a thing, if farmers receive subsidized pesticides, many of them overuse it because they are not used to use it. And another interesting thing is that small farms are significantly more efficient than large farms. This comes from the World Bank, the same World Bank that is promoting large, big monocropping agriculture. So that's interesting. So, technology and innovation comes from big business, and that's what's being pushed mainly. But of course, there is also farmer innovation. Farmers have been innovating from the beginning of times when they started agriculture. They have been exchanging their knowledge on local markets, and they're improving their systems constantly all over the world. And for sure, some farmers are more innovative than others, like everywhere. But innovators are all over the world, also in farms. We happen to know a whole group of farm innovators in Burkina Faso. They're very well organized. This is one of them. This is Yakuba Sawadeko. He happens to be very famous, especially abroad, because there was a film made about his life and what he has been doing. So what you see, well, you see here part of his hard work. It used to be completely degraded, and nothing was growing here. It wasn't possible either because the crust was really very hard. The water wouldn't penetrate anymore. So he made these are traditional planting pits, and he made them bigger, deeper, and added manure, which gave a very productive agricultural field. So there is knowledge, and African farmers really like to share also. They do share with each other. They're very eager to share this, and this is then another model. Here you see another one. This is in northern Ghana. It's in Mauritania. This is a women's group. We were doing a project. It was on identifying and seeing what do people, which initiatives do they take themselves to improve their fields and for sustainable land management, to combat land degradation. This is a women's group without any formal education. This lady, Mamanatu Seidu, she picked up the idea of composting, so organic fertilizer, which the World Bank considers very interesting. She picked up this idea somewhere else. She thought about it, but it's very labor intensive because it's put with pits, compost pits. So they grouped together with a bunch of women, 20 women, and they do the work together for each of their plots. And this gives them, the interesting thing is, in this project they were part of there were 34 countries: Ghana, Morocco, Uganda, and South Africa. And most farmers, when you discuss with them initially, they've been told so many times that what they do and know is backward, that they believe this themselves. So when we showed them interest and told them what they do is very interesting, and we came with a whole international team, also with people from the other countries, this helped them enormously to boost up their self-confidence, knowing that there is a lot of knowledge here. So what we do, and this is also what we build up with our W4A team, you take point of departure are the farmers with their knowledge, and you build on top of that, and you continue, and there's also research that can help to improve things, of course. But the main thing is that the knowledge and what is there and what farmers do and know, you take that as a point of departure. And this is exactly what we do in what I'm doing in all the projects that I'm attached to, but also within our team. And that's yeah. So that's another road towards African modernization in agriculture. So yeah, well, this is in Francis showed this already. Where the women, you see there, the women are separated there because they talk too much. And this is arranged. Okay.
Thank you very much. So you see, in the end, it came back to the
exactly
project. So thanks for a really good window into the different ideas of sustainability and also the different problems that these have, and how even within organizations like the World Bank there are different ideas about what sustainability is and what good ideas is, right? So we're not working in a simple landscape.
Yeah, no, it's very complex. I've tried to make it. I've tried to simplify it for the talk.
In view of the time, I think we can have one or two very short questions for Wendelien, and maybe direct then the other discussion to the after the last talk. Are there any questions now?
So you didn't mention the in particular role that ICT could play, either positively or negatively. Yeah. Could you say something about that?
Yeah, well, that's, yeah, I was run out of time, I guess, but that's exactly what we do with the team, with our team. So you talk a lot with people and see, this, for instance, the Meteo stuff.
Yes, but so I understood, I heard on previous talks,
yeah.
That they were about this role of ICT, that you sketch these problems in the tension between the interests of the big big farming companies and the small farmers.
Yeah.
Is there a role for ICT either as a force for positive or negative influence on these problems?
It can be either side, of course. Yeah, but you can. For instance, there's a lot of data, but not what can I say, explored yet, but that you can collect. There's a lot of knowledge that can be collected, and it's a bit like with ATM system, for instance, that Gayo was talking about. There's a lot of knowledge from traditional medicine. There's also a lot of knowledge about agricultural practices.
Right.
So you can, so you can boost that also with ICT. Yeah, yeah. So in that sense, it's another topic, but it has similarities. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And I also think that you could add that making information systems that are accessible to these very poor and small scale farmers, of course, helps these farmers in particular. And when you have big corporations, then usually there are literate people, they have computers, they have satellites, they have internet connections, they have money.
A lot of information is not accessible for farmers as it is now. And, not all information is also, I mean, yeah, you really look at what are their needs for information as well. Yeah.
Maybe just a compliment, because you mentioned that those, for example, those farmers that accepted those seeds of coffee, that it was probably not a very good choice.
Well, they got into trouble. Most of them got into trouble. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Into debt.
Do you see any possibility of informing them about these kind of threats as well?
Yeah. Well, for instance, they're in Mali. We are working with farmers, and this is about agroforestry. And many farmers do not know the law, because by law, a tree in a field has all kinds of, it's not very easy to understand what is the right on this tree and who can do what with this tree. So what the thing is that the farmers themselves don't know exactly what is the law, so what is their rights. And they were very much in favor, they would like to have, like say, an application in simple language, accessible to them, to know what is the right on trees, on the field, these kind of things. Yeah, yeah. So you can definitely help with that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, so for the last talk, let me just quickly show you this slide. So this is about a project that we're doing in collaboration with between the Computer Science Department and the Department of Sociology here at VU. This is a project funded by the Network Institute that, among other things, funds these cross-domain collaborations. This was one with Julie Ferguson and I applied for, and we got a little grant for that. Julie Ferguson, the students know, because he gave a very nice guest lecture. We were able to send 2 students, Marij Visser and Aske Robenhagen, to Nepal to see the potential for ICT technologies and to map knowledge networks in Nepal, specifically with regards to the rebuilding and after the 2015 earthquake. So the students have already heard a presentation from Marij Visser about let's say the contextual analysis that she did there. Aske stayed a bit longer and was building an application. Unfortunately, he can't be here to show it, but he sent me a video which explains the whole situation. So that's a bit the context. And now I'll switch to Asker's video. I haven't seen it as well, so I'm as surprised as you are. I just got it this morning, so great.
Welcome everybody, my name is Asker Brogenhagen, and thank you for listening to this video presentation of some of the research we are doing at the Network Institute. Before I begin, I'd like to just thank Anna and Victor for inviting me to come and present this work here, which unfortunately I'm not able to be in person because I'm attending an event in Denmark today and one in Sweden tomorrow. But I hope you all have a great day. The ICT4D application I'm presenting here today is the result of a research project at the Network Institute from 2 different areas, with me supervised by Victor from computer science and artificial intelligence, and Julie and Mariah from organizational sciences, providing a social science perspective on the project. Before I describe the application we have built, I want to give you an overview of the local context as well as the partner organizations we work with out there to sort of give the background of why the app is built the way it is and some of the principles that might be useful for other people working in ICT4D on similar applications. On the 25th of April 2015, Nepal was struck by a 7.8 megawatt earthquake in the central region, along with several aftershocks. The shocks left nearly 9,000 people dead, people injured, and 3.5 million people homeless. This is in a country of 29 million people, where roughly 25% live below the poverty line, and the infrastructure is already in serious need of development. The international aid response was one of the biggest ever. Coping effectively with a disaster of this magnitude takes an enormous amount of oversight, knowledge, and cooperation between many different stakeholders, from the most local to the highest levels of government and management of relief institutions. To help with this effort, many local organizations organize volunteers. 2 of these organizations, Accountability Lab in Nepal and local interventions groups, the very next day used their extensive networks to organize volunteers to help with connecting people via radio after the telephone networks went down, and visiting remote villages to gather their needs and bring this information to relief organizations who otherwise might not have known and been able to respond effectively to their calamity. 2 years after the earthquake, despite hard work by all these different organizations, a lot of problems still remain. Thousands of people still live in temporary shelter, which is not fit for neither the rains of monsoons or the cold winters. And despite money having been earmarked by the government and set aside for it, big sums of that has not been paid out, both because the procedures for obtaining can be difficult, people don't have ID cards, or for those who have obtained it, it hasn't been enough to rebuild their houses because the stipulations for getting the grant require that you use cement and steel, which has to be transported into a lot of these places out of the mountains, which makes building a house a lot more expensive than what the grant allows for, which means that these people are sort of stuck in limbo where they can't get the second level of the grant because they haven't started building, and they don't have enough money to start building the first round. The effects of the earthquakes also led to a lot of Nepalis seeking employment in the Gulf states and other Asian countries. And for people in the rural communities, that often means organizing this through a manpower agency. Problem is that a lot of these manpower agencies are run by unscrupulous people who will charge a high sum to organize a job that then eventually turns out to be a lot worse paid and with a lot worse condition than originally stipulated, meaning that some of these people end up in debt or slavery in these Middle Eastern countries. These effects of the earthquake have led Accountability Lab, the organization we work most closely with in Nepal, to change their focus from purely relief to one that focuses on the ongoing long-term reconstruction effort, as well as the related issue of migratory workers and the issues that arise from that, both mobilities, but also for people who are abroad. The way the student helped us work is that there's a central office who sort of coordinates all the activities, and then there's a big team of community frontline associates or CFAs who work in the field, in the communities where they build up sort of long-term relationships and become the sort of go-to person for information. So if someone has like a particular issue or things come up again, like either individually or in big community meetings that they organize, for example, the reconstruction efforts or things that are a bit more sensitive, for example, like admitting that you were defrauded by a manpower agency, which can often take a long time to discover. These people are able to do that and gather this data that can then be used to either go directly to someone who's in power and able to make some changes, like at the government level, or approaching relief organizations or someone else who might have an expertise in this particular area, which means that these people who are out in rural communities and maybe have a lack of access to the right kind of information about who to contact, there's like an effective go-between who can organize this and help resolve some of these issues. That's sort of the main working method, as well as like sort of like intermittent surveys on behalf of other organizations. To investigate what we could offer to this project, so living labs, we started out by going there and then closely analyzing using network analysis the knowledge that flows through this knowledge network and see how we could improve this network and their processes to help them achieve more impact from the very situated local knowledge out of villages, and transforming that into something that could be made actionable by the big relief organizations and local government stakeholders. So we started out by mapping all this and then sort of creating like a chart of challenges, and then later on I'll present our proposed solution to these challenges. Based on this analysis, we identified the key challenges for Accountability Lab and Citizen Health as an organization, as well as some desirable traits that any like technological solution should have based on previous experience on other ICT4D projects, as well as consideration of the local context. The main sort of big challenge they face is that there's a lot of change constantly, both sort of like environmentally, like certain areas we are hearing a lot of reports that like sort of changing weather patterns means that farming has changed, but also like roads changing because of rain and stuff like that. And the fact that there's not a lot of connectivity for a lot of these means that the CFAs work in an area where a lot of the time they don't have any internet connectivity, or they don't have access to power to charge their phones, which of course means that any sort of like solution that uses a lot of either data or power is going to be difficult to implement and use out in the field. Another issue is that the political situation is changing. There's just been a local election for the first time since 1997 here on Sunday, which is going to take place over 2 rounds, second one in June. And it means that since then, no new officials have been elected to these posts. They've sort of been taken over by bureaucrats or the parties themselves, which means that it's been very unclear who's entirely responsible for some of the funding and take responsibility for some of these projects. Accountability Lab and Citizen Health Desk have to organize and work within this area. So a lot of the sort of the local knowledge they have about who to contact to get things done is some very important knowledge, but something that is probably about to change now after the election. Another thing is that as an NGO, the donor situation changes a lot. So depending on the focus and how involved the donors want to be, that also has an impact on the focus of their project. For example, whilst we were there, they got a new donor, which explains part of the focus and move to migration of labor, because that was the American charity backing them, one of their big issues. So that's something that needs to be taken into consideration as well, that a lot of the data we collect might potentially see a different use in the future as well. So sort of a flexible data model might be used for storing this, so it can be used in the future, whereas but right now it's not being stored at all after it's collected and sort of made into a monthly report. It just sort of gets deleted and lost. Based on the analysis of other ICT4D projects, we also came up with some sort of desirable qualities of any potential solutions. And the first one is the principle of reuse, reduce, and recycle. So to help facilitate uptake and make people use this technology, we want them to reuse existing technologies, reduce the amount of new technologies that need to be implemented because that makes the learning curve bigger and makes it hard to maintain. And also, if it's possible to recycle existing data and tools and incorporate them in some way. I think that will make it easier to get people to use this new tool. Another thing to consider in this context is the idea of robust development. So including redundancies to make sure that even if one part of the system fails because of like power or there's no data for a couple days, other aspects of the application can still work. For example, by storing the information locally and only submitting when there's Wi-Fi, building it in a way so the each individual part is sort of modular, so if one component fails, the other one can still work. Because sometimes, like, there's no one around to maintain it, or there's, as I said, there can be like a major outage, like in a disaster situation, for example. And the final principle is sort of like, if it's possible to enhance local knowledge sharing, then that's often a desirable aspect. And sometimes a lot of this information comes for free. So even if the focus is on migration and reconstruction, often you have a community meeting, a lot of other issues will come up, so things like water and stuff like that, that might be of interest to a potential donor or another relief organization that works in this area. So based on this analysis, the challenges and sort of the positive desiderata, we developed the Citizen Help Desk app, which I'm going to present now. It consists basically of 4 different aspects: an announcement, where people in the office can make announcements to all the CFAs, a chat app, which uses very little data that allows CFAs to sort of communicate in real time, both with the office and amongst each other. It consists of a wiki, where they can sort of add notes on things that work as a learning organization. So when they conducted a community meeting or they managed to resolve a kind of issue, they can write up about that and sort of like share this knowledge amongst each other, because they often don't see each other very often. As well as sort of like the core, which is like the daily community report and surveys. I'll go over each part in turn in a minute. But first of all, the whole app only takes up about 600 kilobytes. It doesn't require any sort of proprietary tools, anything like that. Everything's open source and free, which makes it very easy for an organization in another context to get up and running very quickly, as well as to localize it to fit a particular need or a particular language. All the components of the app sort of work individually. And the first one I'm going to go over is the announcement part, which was based on a sort of a use case and a need for people in the office to send out general information, or whenever there's a new change in sort of like regulations or some kind of major announcement needs to be stored and accessible permanently to the CFAs in the field. So we built this using sort of their WordPress website, which they already have, and which you can get for free, which allows them to use a custom post type very easily to write a post so they can store it locally on the CFA's smartphone. The second part is the chat component, which allow field workers and the office to communicate in real time with one another, sort of pretty data efficient way. And that's again based on the need that it was difficult to keep in contact with one another because all the CFAs have like different tools they were using, and there's different ways of working kind of thing. So now by giving everyone a very cheap smartphone, they can keep in contact and store this knowledge, which might be something interesting in the chats also. The third component is sort of a shared wiki where the frontline workers and the office workers can collaboratively create guides on how to perform sort of different activities of the job, like organizing a community meeting, or if they find a solution to a particular issue that comes up, how they approach and how to solve it kind of thing. So this kind of knowledge can be shared with the other CFAs. They're trying to sort of increase the amount of time they meet, but very often they don't meet all together except once every second month. So this is a way to help them collaborate and learn from each other as they work. The final component is the main data gathering tool of the application. It's structured around a data report, data databases. CFAs will fill this in about the people they talk to and stuff, and sort of general trends. Then there's the community report, which is when they have a community meeting for a large gathering of people. And finally, there's a survey, which is like more topic-based and done in an ad hoc fashion, for example, for another organization or when there's a particular topic of interest. All of the reports can be changed and very easily structured using the backend of the Kobo Toolbox, which is an open source tool and backed by a lot of big donors, which means that for humanitarian organizations, it's free and allows unlimited data storage of images, videos, and audio, which the CFAs produce a lot of from the community meetings, for example, and so interviews they conduct. We went with this option because this seems to be a trend as well from a lot of people we interviewed in Kathmandu and in other organizations, that there's a certain sort of respectability around this tool, because also because of its backers and because it's so easy to use as well. So we want to incorporate this, and it was something that they already used previously, which meant that there wasn't much of a learning curve to using this tool instead of something custom built. So it followed in line with sort of the desiderata we had as well, or a desirable implementation. Furthermore, it allowed easy offline use, so whenever the CFAs don't have internet access, They can store the reports locally and submit them whenever they have access. Once the reports are submitted, you have a very easy way of getting an overview using a COBOL backend that allows you to sort of visualize all the data you've gathered on a map. You can get summary statistics and other things that help people in the office get an overview of what's going on, which is something that they previously struggled to because they would get messages from some people on WhatsApp, some from Facebook, some on email. This way they have it all in one place and have a very easy way of exporting it for analysis in other programs if they want, CIS-VU or anything like that. So it helps them get the overview they need to create their reports and to get the overview needed to make sort of decisions about directions and people to contact. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about the future of this app and where it's at the moment. We have conducted tests with a lot of the CFAs and sort of built it with them in an iterative process in Nepal. And next week we are rolling it out, so everyone will have to start using this tool for all the data gathering and communication between each other. We're a little bit sort of delayed by the election sort of last week, which meant that we weren't allowed to do some of the activities, but now we are organizing this. And the next step as well is in the coming months, another organization we've been in contact with are doing a project where they're going to track relief funding from the moment it's signed into law or sort of a requisition is made. And we want to track that money all the way down to the final end project. And they're using another tool to gather this data, but we want to build sort of a backend that can take this data from COBOL structured into linked data so we can integrate these different data sets and create sort of complex queries across these different data sets that will allow us to do a lot more complex analysis and sort of identify things that would not be possible with all these different data sets that a lot of these different organizations have. Which was a point that many organizations also mentioned out there. There's a lot of sort of separate activities going on all around, very little coordination between them. This sort of data gathering and sharing should allow it to be possible to do more coordinated efforts and ultimately make the funding much more effective in the way it's used on the ground projects. The final thing we want to do as well is we have been in contact with Accountability Labs, so the overall organization, and they're interested in trying to expand this project potentially to Liberia and Pakistan, two other countries they're working in. But that's depending on the impact assessment we can conduct in the coming months as well. Okay, I think that's everything for me. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this video presentation, and I hope to have conversations with several of you in the future about your projects. Thank you.
I'm not sure if we should applaud.
No, we should.
Also nice to have the concentration out of it. Yeah, so this is ongoing. Oscar will come back and we'll actually, we're working a bit on the data backend, on the data integration, and see how we can actually combine all kinds of heterogeneous information. So I'm actually pleasantly surprised. I think it's really nice and quite far already, so that's also nice for me as supervisor. I also think it ends this symposium on a very positive note. I think all the talks are really nice. I thoroughly enjoyed this year's version of the symposium, and that means that we'll of course have one next year. So you're all invited. Of course, you'll be most of the students here will be doing very important other things, but you are invited. So make sure to keep an eye on our Twitter streams and talk to maybe students who will try to contact you. I just want to end very briefly by again thanking our sponsors. So VU Network Institute, Computer Science, and Center for International Cooperation. Also the SIX Research School who made it possible to get our keynote speaker Gayo Diallo up here. And with that, I'd like to thank not only you, the audience, but also all the speakers again for a wonderful morning. Thank you. That's it. You're free to go out.